What if everything you've learned about negotiation is wrong? What if winning isn't about being smarter, louder, or tougher? A former FBI hostage negotiator discovered that the most powerful weapon in any negotiation isn't logic, it's psychology. In this video, you'll learn the same techniques used to negotiate with kidnappers, criminals, CEOs, and difficult people, and how you can use them in everyday life to get better deals, build trust, and influence anyone. Chapter 1. The New Rules. Paragraph Style. Chapter 1. The New Rules. Paragraph Style. Paragraph Style. Text Principles. Paragraph Style. Numbers. Traditional negotiation methods assume people make rational decisions, but real life shows that emotions usually come first and logic comes second. Through his experience as an FBI hostage negotiator, he learned that successful negotiators focus on understanding the other person's feelings, fears, and motivations, rather than trying to win arguments. During a negotiation exercise at Harvard, Voss was faced with a demand he could not meet, and instead of arguing, he asked, "How am I supposed to do that?" This simple question forced the other side to think about his problem and become part of the solution. The chapter shows that negotiation is present in every part of life, from business deals and salary discussions to family conversations. The most important lesson is that people want to feel understood before they are willing to cooperate. Therefore, a negotiator should listen carefully, remain calm, avoid arguing, and use thoughtful questions to guide the conversation. By focusing on emotions and creating a sense of understanding, a person gains more influence and is far more likely to achieve a successful outcome. Main lesson. People make decisions emotionally and justify them logically later. If you understand emotions, ask good questions, and make others feel understood, you gain influence without fighting. Chapter 2. Be a Mirror. Paragraph Style. Chapter 2 teaches that great negotiators are great listeners. Chris Voss explains that one of the biggest mistakes people make is entering a conversation with assumptions about what the other person wants or thinks. During a bank hostage crisis, the FBI believed the robbers wanted to surrender, but this assumption turned out to be completely wrong. The experience taught Voss that negotiators must approach every situation with curiosity and a mindset of discovery. Instead of focusing on their own arguments, they should focus entirely on listening and gathering information. The chapter introduces the concept of active listening, where the goal is to make the other person feel safe enough to keep talking. When people talk more, they reveal valuable information about their needs, fears, and motivations. Voss also emphasizes slowing down the conversation because people feel more understood when they are not rushed. One of the most powerful tools discussed is mirroring, which involves repeating the last few important words that the other person says. This simple technique encourages them to continue speaking and often causes them to reveal deeper thoughts and feelings. By listening carefully, speaking calmly, and using mirroring, negotiators build trust and uncover information that would otherwise remain hidden. Main lesson. Stop trying to be interesting. Be interested. Listen deeply, slow the conversation down, and use mirroring to encourage people to reveal what they really think. Chapter 3. Don't feel their pain. Label it paragraph style. Chapter 3 introduces one of the most important concepts in the entire book, tactical empathy. Chris Voss explains that successful negotiation begins when people feel understood. Tactical empathy does not mean agreeing with someone or feeling sorry for them. It means recognizing and understanding their emotions and perspective. The key technique in this chapter is called labeling. A label is a statement that identifies what another person may be feeling, such as, "It sounds like you're frustrated," or "It seems like you're worried about this situation." When people hear their emotions accurately described, they often relax and become more open to cooperation. Voss explains that negative emotions are especially important because unspoken fears, anger, and doubts can quietly block a negotiation. By naming these emotions openly, a negotiator reduces their power. The chapter also introduces the accusation audit, a technique where you openly mention the negative thoughts or criticisms the other person may have about you before they do. This removes tension and builds trust. The ultimate goal is to make the other person respond with the words, "That's right." When someone says, "That's right," it means they feel truly understood, and at that moment, trust is created. Once trust exists, influence becomes much easier. Main lesson. People cooperate when they feel understood. Identify and label emotions, acknowledge concerns openly, and aim for that's right, because understanding creates trust, and trust creates influence. Simple formula from chapters 2 to 3. Listen carefully to mirror their words, to label their emotions, to build trust, to influence the outcome. Chapter 4. Beware yes, master. That's right, paragraph style. In Chapter 4, Chris Voss explains that many negotiators make the mistake of chasing the word yes. They believe that once someone says yes, the negotiation is successful. However, people often say yes simply to be polite, avoid conflict, or end an uncomfortable conversation. A much more valuable response is, that's right. When someone says that's right, it means they genuinely feel understood and believe you accurately understand their situation, feelings, and perspective. Voss teaches that the best way to reach this point is through active listening, mirroring, labeling emotions, and summarizing what the other person has said. When a summary accurately reflects someone's thoughts and emotions, they often respond with, that's right. At that moment, trust is created because people naturally connect with those who understand them. The chapter emphasizes that influence does not come from arguing or persuading, but from making people feel understood. Once people feel understood, they become far more willing to listen to your ideas and work with you toward a solution. The central lesson of this chapter is that understanding comes before influence, and that's right is one of the strongest signals that true understanding has been achieved. Main lesson: don't focus on getting yes, focus on making the other person feel completely understood until they say, that's right. Chapter 5. Trigger the 2 words that transform any negotiation. Paragraph style. In Chapter 5, Chris Voss challenges one of the biggest fears in negotiation, hearing the word no. Most people see no as rejection or failure, but Voss argues that no is actually the beginning of a productive negotiation. People feel safe when they can say no because it gives them a sense of control and protects them from feeling pressured. When negotiators try too hard to force agreement, the other side often becomes defensive and resistant. However, when people are allowed to say no freely, they relax and become more open to discussion. Voss explains that no rarely means never. More often it means I need more information, I am not comfortable yet, or I do not understand. The chapter encourages negotiators to view no as valuable information rather than a setback. It also teaches the importance of negotiating from the other person's perspective. Instead of focusing on what you want, focus on their concerns, fears, and needs. When people feel that they have control over the conversation and that their perspective matters, they become much more willing to cooperate. The chapter ultimately shows that successful negotiators do not fear no. They use it as a tool to create trust, uncover information, and move negotiations forward. Main lesson: no is not the end of a negotiation. Soward. R. BCC. When we progress becomes possible. Chapter 6. Bend their reality. Paragraph style. In Chapter 6, Chris Voss explains that successful negotiators understand that people do not make decisions based purely on objective facts. Instead, they make decisions based on their perception of reality. Because of this, negotiators can influence outcomes by carefully framing situations and controlling how information is presented. One of the most important concepts in this chapter is the power of fairness. People have a strong emotional reaction when they believe something is unfair, so the word fair can be used strategically to gain attention or encourage cooperation. Voss also discusses the importance of deadlines, explaining that people often make emotional and irrational decisions when they believe time is running out. Another key idea is loss aversion, the psychological principle that people fear losing something more than they enjoy gaining something of equal value. Skilled negotiators frame proposals so that rejecting an offer feels like a loss rather than accepting it feeling like a gain. Throughout the chapter, Voss shows that negotiation is not simply about presenting facts, but about shaping how those facts are perceived. By understanding emotions, urgency, fairness, and loss, negotiators can influence decisions without using force or pressure. Main lesson: people respond to how they perceive reality, not necessarily to reality itself. Frame situations carefully, use fairness wisely, and remember that people are more motivated to avoid losses than to achieve gains. Chapter 7. Create the illusion of control. Paragraph style. In Chapter 7, Chris Voss introduces one of the most powerful negotiation tools in the book: calibrated questions. These are open-ended questions that usually begin with how or what. Instead of telling people what to do, calibrated questions encourage them to think and solve problems themselves. Voss explains that people naturally want control over their decisions. When negotiators try to force solutions, resistance appears. However, when people believe they are choosing their own path, they become much more cooperative. Questions such as, "How am I supposed to do that?" or "What is the biggest challenge here?" shift the burden of problem solving to the other side while keeping the conversation collaborative. The chapter demonstrates that the best negotiators guide rather than command. By asking thoughtful questions, they gather information, uncover hidden concerns, and gently steer the discussion in the desired direction. These questions also help negotiators say no without creating conflict because they encourage the other side to reconsider unrealistic demands on their own. Ultimately, the chapter teaches that influence comes from making others feel empowered rather than controlled. Main lesson: people support solutions they help create. Ask how and what questions to make the other person think, solve problems, and feel in control while you guide the negotiation. Chapter 8: Guarantee Execution. Paragraph Style. In Chapter 8, Chris Voss focuses on one of the biggest problems in negotiation: getting people to actually follow through on what they agree to do. Many negotiations fail, not because an agreement is bad, but because the negotiator never discovers whether the other person is truly committed. Voss explains that words alone are not enough. A person may say yes, while secretly having doubts or lacking the authority to make a decision. To avoid this problem, negotiators must ask calibrated questions that uncover hidden obstacles and reveal whether the other side can really deliver. One useful technique is paying close attention to language and behavior. People who are genuinely committed usually speak clearly and confidently, while those who are uncertain often use vague or evasive language. Voss also explains the importance of identifying everyone involved in a decision. Sometimes the person at the negotiation table is not the actual decision maker. Successful negotiators make sure they know who has the power to approve or reject an agreement. The chapter teaches that negotiation does not end when someone says yes, it ends when action happens. Main lesson: A deal is not successful because someone agrees to it. A deal is successful when the agreement is actually carried out. Always verify commitment, authority, and execution. Chapter 9: Bargain Hard. Paragraph Style. In Chapter 9, Chris Voss introduces the concept of bargaining and explains how to negotiate effectively when discussing money, salaries, prices, or other specific demands. He warns against immediately accepting or rejecting offers because the first number mentioned often becomes an anchor that influences the rest of the negotiation. Instead of reacting emotionally, negotiators should remain calm and use strategic responses. One of the most powerful techniques discussed is the use of calibrated questions and carefully planned counteroffers. Voss also explains the importance of showing respect while remaining firm. The goal is not to defeat the other side, but to reach an agreement that works while protecting your interests. The chapter introduces the idea that successful negotiators combine empathy with persistence. They understand the other person's needs while continuing to advocate for their own goals. Throughout the chapter, Voss demonstrates that bargaining is not about being aggressive. It is about being patient, strategic, and emotionally intelligent. By controlling emotions and using thoughtful negotiation techniques, people can often achieve much better outcomes than by simply accepting the first offer they receive. Main lesson: never rush into accepting the first offer. Stay calm, negotiate strategically, and use empathy and patience to achieve a better outcome. Chapter 10: Find the Black Swan. Paragraph Style. In the final chapter, Chris Voss introduces the concept of the black swan, which refers to hidden pieces of information that can completely change a negotiation. Most people negotiate based only on the information they already know, but great negotiators search for unknown facts, hidden motivations, secret fears, and unseen opportunities. Voss explains that every person has information they have not revealed, and often this information is far more important than the facts already on the table. By listening carefully, asking thoughtful questions, and observing behavior, negotiators can uncover these hidden factors. Once a black swan is discovered, the entire negotiation can shift dramatically. A deal that seemed impossible may suddenly become easy, or a difficult situation may reveal a simple solution. The chapter teaches that curiosity is one of the most powerful tools in negotiation. Instead of assuming you know everything, keep searching for information that others overlook. The negotiator who discovers the hidden truth often gains the greatest advantage. Main lesson: the most important information is often the information you don't know yet. Stay curious, ask questions, and look for the hidden facts that can change everything. In conclusion, Never Split the Difference teaches that successful negotiation is not about winning arguments or forcing agreement. It is about understanding people, managing emotions, building trust, and uncovering hidden information. Chris Voss shows that techniques such as active listening, mirroring, labeling emotions, calibrated questions, and finding black swans can transform the way we communicate. Whether in business, relationships, or everyday life, the person who listens best and understands others most deeply gains the greatest influence. The ultimate lesson of the book is simple. People do not want to be defeated or persuaded. They want to be understood. The best negotiators don't control conversations. They understand people.